Hello, everyone, and welcome to eLearnChat, where talk is knowledge. Today we've got with us Sarah Gilbert. Here we go.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Zanotti, and welcome to eLearnChat. Well, we are joined today by our co-host, the lovely,
Hello,
the
I feel like it's been forever.
Yep, Dawn Mahoney. Hey, Dawn, how are you?
Good. Beautiful day at the lake. It's raining again.
At the lake, the big lake.
Yeah. Little lake.
Just
little lake.
Yep. And we've got with us, do you want to introduce her?
I'd love to. Welcome to my friend Sarah Gilbert, and she's here to talk about mLearnCon because Rick and I did not get to go. So welcome.
I know, and I really missed you guys. Made me very sad.
We bonded so well at EllisCon.
Yeah, I was actually scheduled to go, but then we were so swamped at work that we have a really big project we're wrapping up, and couldn't leave it when we had to leave it, and so we are here.
Work schmirk.
I wanted to go to that one too, and especially since San Diego is not far from where we are. It's only about a 2.5-hour drive. So.
I know. That's a really sad excuse. I had to do work. Do you know how much work I did while I was there in the middle of the night? Shameful.
Yeah. But the work we had to do, unfortunately, required us here to manage a whole mess of people doing a large conversion project. So didn't want to leave people alone on that one.
And then you wouldn't be able to interview me today to give you a recap.
That's true.
Oh, we probably would have done that anyway. Can't be all places at once.
This is a true story.
You know?
Especially at any conference, but, you know, when you get into events like mLearnCon where you have tracks that are extremely technical and in-depth, and then you have tracks that are more for beginners and, you know, folks that are really new to certain concepts. You have a lot of ground to cover. Yeah,
I bet that's true, and I bet with especially it being mobile, that every year they probably have new attendees that are kind of wide-eyed and wondering.
Yes, that's true. And, you know, one of the other things too with specifically mLearnCon as opposed to maybe a conference that's on, maybe classroom training that's been around forever, the mobile conferences change dramatically every year as far as how much further we've come with technology and our capabilities and the possibilities, and also the work that people are doing that folks have done since the last conference. So it's one of my favorite conferences by far.
How many people are attending now?
I want to say this one, if I remember correctly, I think it was close to 1,100.
That's big. That's bigger than I thought it was.
That's about like last year. I think they were right around that same mark.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's double, I think, from Learning Solutions too, right? About
Learning Solutions is probably closer to 1,500.
Is it?
Yeah. I was going to say it seemed like it was pretty close to the same number of people.
And we were stretched out, so that's my only frame of reference. And I've only been to one guild conference to this point. So, what has changed? What's different from last year?
So I think last year the biggest difference that I saw is last year there was a lot of conceptual information, and there was a lot of, just try it and just beta this and start small and those types of things, and, you know, almost talking about mobile as if it was some mystical creature that, you know, wasn't really doable unless you had the budget or the time or had a really important need for it. And this year I saw a lot more of the practical applications of mobile, specifically in areas of user-generated content and things that aren't apps and aren't mobile web. And that's where I think that most people that are new to mobile can get the most benefit the fastest. If you think about people that are in even e-learning or classroom training, and they're looking at how can mobile help them. That was one of the things that I saw a lot of at this conference. You would have speakers that were talking about how to incorporate mobile into classroom training. I think Larry Straining actually did a session on that, and how can you integrate or use mobile affordances to help with classroom training. So there are a lot of really practical uses of mobile that you can apply now, that you don't have to spend tons of money and invest in these applications, this custom app development for native apps on folks' devices. I'm a huge advocate of ebooks, and that's something that I would love to talk about today, because there's actually a new standard for ebooks, for interactive ebooks. It's called EPUB 3, and it allows you to have a lot more interactivity. So we could maybe talk a little bit about that.
Where are those standards published, and how do we get a hold of them?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I learned just a little bit of background. And EPUB, a lot of people have e-readers. They'll have a Nook, or they'll read on iBooks on their iPhone or their Apple device, and they see it as, this is the way that I can read books by the pool, right? What we have missed, or we are currently missing, a huge opportunity in training at making our manuals more interactive, interactive job aids, and even in having entire courses in this format. And what an EPUB is it's basically a zip file. So instead of having it be .zip, it's .epub. And what this does is it zips up a bunch of content. So it could be videos, it could be images, audio, you could have text, obviously. And so you can really create a very interactive experience and very rich content by using this EPUB format. And so a couple of tools that you can use to build it. One would be something like InDesign. So most folks have Adobe Creative Cloud now, I would say, in our industry, especially if they're in any kind of design or development, creative development. So you could use InDesign to create EPUBs. You can also use an open source tool. There's a tool that Google has that's called Sigil. It's SIGIL, and it's free. And you can create EPUBs using that tool as well. So if you create this EPUB content, then it can be delivered to any device that has an e-reader, and now that includes desktop browsers as well. There's a Chrome plugin with an e-reader on it. Actually, there are lots of them. So you have a lot more accessibility for that file format. But the thing that's really cool about it is, one, it's all encompassed into one file. So you can link it up to a website or whatever, and you can actually click on it. As a matter of fact, on my website, there's a sample one on my resources page that you can download, and it teaches you how to make one. So maybe that's something useful to kind of point out that might be helpful to people. But, when you look at that accessibility, you could throw an EPUB file in Dropbox, and people could access it, or Google Drive, or on your website, and it can download that content native to their device. So now they have that video, audio, everything, all that content is now available on their mobile device offline, and it's accessible, because in e-readers you can change text size, it reflows, so you're not locked into like that PDF, pinch and zoom type thing. You don't have to worry about responsive content, because that by default it reflows based on the viewport size of your device. So that's something that's really low-hanging fruit. And basically, if you can create content in Microsoft Word, then you can use any of those tools. You could, InDesign might have a little bit of more of a learning curve, but something like Sigil is very simple to create EPUBs in, and it's something that people can do now. But yeah,
I'm going to try it, because I've been building interactive documentation. I build a lot in PowerPoint just because I can do it fast, and then move it to with all the links to our intranet and so forth, and then move it to PDF. So I think that I have InDesign. I haven't used it yet, so that's my next move.
Is the target things like Kindle Reader, Nook Reader?
The target is for it to be anything. It's for it to be BYOD. So here's what you do. You create that EPUB file, and then you can use a tool like Calibre, right? Which it's CALIBRE. you can use a tool like Calibre to convert it for Kindle, because Kindle's really the only thing that has a different file format. It's a MOBI file, which is MOBI. And so if you take an EPUB and you convert it, so you create the content one time in that EPUB format, and then you would convert it to a MOBI, and you could convert it to a PDF, and then you've reached pretty much everybody. So, that PDF will reach all the folks that are on desktops that might not have an e-reader plugin, and then your EPUBs are going to be readable on any mobile device. There's a free reader, anything from a Kobo app to an iBooks app. I mean, there are free e-readers for every mobile device now. And the only thing with Kindle, though, and I would say Kindle is not a good tool for mobile learning or for anything outside of just casual reading right now, is that it doesn't allow you to embed video and audio files. There are workarounds to some of that, but you can't just by default convert over to a MOBI and keep all of your interactivity. And that's a shame, but that's just one of the downsides to that file format, that MOBI file format. But anything that reads an EPUB, so all of your Android devices, Windows devices, bless their heart, and the Apple devices would all read that EPUB format.
Now on Kindle, there are some interactive books. I haven't really seen any yet. I've only
I have one or two.
It's because they're built in a different tool. So it's not something that's being built in an EPUB and then converted over. So you would have to do the work twice. You would have to build it specifically for Kindle.
Okay.
Do you have to, if you create it in some other file format, whether it's, and I truly don't know how to do this. So you create it in whatever file, if it's Adobe or if it's Microsoft, and then if you want to, do you have to start completely over to put it in MOBI, or does it translate? Do you have to do coding behind the scenes? I have not worked with building directly for Kindle. Everything that I've done for Kindle has been a conversion from an EPUB, because I, as far as in the learning space, have not found an organization that was like, yeah, I just bought a bunch of Kindles from my organization. It's usually more like iPads or something like that. Yeah. But so I'm not sure what the process is specifically for Kindle. I can tell you that the EPUB format is based off of XHTML files. So technically, you could write your content in Word, and then you could save it out as an XHTML file, and then import it into something like Sigil and have your pages already pretty much set up. Depending on the amount of formatting and like extra tag junk that's in your file, you may have to cut some of that out. It kind of poses a problem when you have all that extra formatting and stuff in there. But especially if you use stock photos and stock vid, right?
Well, I mean, if you're working in plain text, then you can pretty much import it and then import your assets separately. So have a folder with images, have a folder with video, and a folder with audio, and then have a file that's just plain text with all of your content, all your text, and then you can upload each of those individually in Sigil and create that content. So kind of getting to where the EPUB 3 is going is that now with EPUB 3, it's all HTML based, HTML5. And so you have the addition of JavaScript, you have CSS, so you have a lot more functionality. And one of the coolest things I saw at mLearnCon was that now is that you in EPUB 3 you can actually add XAPI statements to that, and you can get very granular reporting to an LRS as far as how people are interacting with your books. So meaning that if I created a piece of learning content in an EPUB 3 format, and then I sent that to all my learners, and I'm not talking about through an LMS, I'm just saying like maybe they access it through a website or whatever, and it's completely offline, they can go through and interact with that ebook. So they could make highlights, they could add notes, they could watch videos, and then once they have a connection again, or if they're connected at the time, it'll send those XAPI statements back. So I could say, Sarah highlighted this on Tuesday at 4 p.m. or she finished whatever page on this day, or she watched this video, or it just depends on how granular, because that's the beauty of XAPI, which was formerly Project Tin Can, is that you can get that very granular reporting based on what types of things you want to capture. And it's very easy to build those statements into the EPUB 3 format because it is all HTML5. And it works. I mean, they plugged it in beautifully, and it wasn't even anything major programming. If you're not a super programmer, and you don't know everything
Which
about
I'm not. Rick knows I don't do code.
You do have to have a decent understanding of programming languages in order to do something like this. But I guess the point is that it's not overly complicated. And it's something that's certainly doable. But just at a very low level, if you didn't want to have the reporting and that wasn't something that was a concern to you, you can still create really rich interactions through that EPUB format for classroom training, for asynchronous learning. I mean, there are lots of different opportunities that you have for something like that. And it's very rich mobile content.
I like the idea that you could, instead of it feeling a little bit like Big Brother, so to speak, but that you could, at all your learning checkpoints and from a standardization, we know that they've met these milestones within, if timeframes matter, and that sort of thing. I can definitely see application that way, rather than expecting them to then go to an LMS or a content management system and log in and so forth. I can definitely see.
Right, and that's the beauty of mobile learning in general, is that we're not doing this to check a box. We're doing this to help people perform. We're doing
just-in-time learning and all of those things. I need to know how to do this widget thing now.
Yeah, and how can we reinforce things that they did learn in the classroom? I mean, classroom is still a big piece of training, so how can we reinforce that through mobile solutions? And, mobile can still be the original source of where you learned something. I mean, a lot of folks, this came out at the conference and a lot of the sessions that I did, I often will ask the question, how many of you have gone to YouTube to learn to do something for the first time that you've never done before?
Exactly.
Pinterest is a great example. Lately, I've been looking to do, some projects, never done them before, don't know anything about it, but I'm going out to Pinterest and getting, information, instructions to be able to do that all on my device. And, I can watch a video on YouTube and learn how to do something at my own pace and never have to step into a classroom. So there are a lot of opportunities that we have to really look at where mobile fits into our learning strategy, where it fits into, is kind of another tool or another way, another opportunity that we have in our toolbox to help people learn. That's all we're here for anyway.
Now, were there any other announcements, anything new, different from any of the authoring vendors or any other things you saw?
Yes, absolutely. So there were a few other things, and I'll just kind of touch on a few of the bigger areas. One, Captivate 8 was just released, and Captivate 8 now has, it's obviously Captivate's a rapid development tool, and it's traditionally been known for simulations, so simulation-based training, and obviously e-learning as a whole. But they have now in 8 the ability to support responsive projects, meaning that you can build for desktop, for tablet, and for smartphone all on one stage. And you can set it up based on breakpoints of certain sizes. You can set up that desktop view first, and then that filters down to the other views. So you work in desktop and set it up the way that you want it. And then you work in your tablet view, and you can manipulate what sizes you want to set those breakpoints. So you can set up your tablet view, and then you can set up your smartphone view, and have it all be encompassed in one file. So that way when you publish it out based on what device that learner is accessing your content from, it will show them the appropriate display of content. It's
smart
not
that way.
What's that?
It got smart. It knows
yes,
which
it got
device.
smarter. For sure. Yeah. Or it helped us accommodate being smarter about and more intentional about the way that people access our content or use our content. And the nice thing about it is that, if you're in a smartphone view, your menus are going to look totally different. Your content is going to be accessed a lot differently because you're on a smaller screen. And so it accommodates, screen size as a percentage rather than an actual pixel. It gives you the ability to do that anyway. So you can say, I want this to show up 50%, through the page or midway through the page. So it works in percentages rather than saying, I want this at a specific pixel location, because obviously that pixel location would be different based on what your viewport is. My 50%, or I'm sorry, pixel 264 on a desktop view would be far over to the left. But if I'm at 264 on a mobile device, it's going to be far over to the right. So, we just looking at that, I think that's probably one of the biggest things for a rapid development tool, aside from the fact that Captivate 8 also supports geolocation. And that is huge, and it's actually extremely easy to do. So you can deliver content to folks based on where they are. So I could say, if you're in Atlanta, Georgia, I want you to view this piece of content or this version of content. And then if you're out in California, at Rick's house, you can see this version of content, and you can pinpoint it to a very specific geolocation based on GPS coordinates, your latitude and longitude, or you can set it up based on kind of a radial location or an area of accuracy. So, that's extremely powerful. And a lot of us, that are in the mobile space are doing a lot of sales training. And, you think about a salesperson that's at a certain location and you want them to have information about a specific client. You can do that set up on location. So they don't have to go to a menu or a search function to try to find that client's information. They can just have it popped up based on where they are. Same thing for orientation. If you have new hires and you want them to only be able to access this content while they're on site, you can do that.
Yeah, that's how I saw. Pooja showed us that, and I could definitely see that option being used.
And that's a big concern for people that are in mobile. They say, well, I don't want, whenever all my new hires leave, I don't want them to leave with all of our proprietary information. Well, make it set based on geolocation. And granted, they can still take a screenshot, but they can also write it down and walk out with a piece of paper too, so
it isn't about the lockdown so much as there might be need for building certain content in for this learner group in California versus the learner group in Atlanta. And that's how I see it from an orientation standpoint.
True. And, if you think about the accessibility piece of it, that's something that there are applications now that you can leverage that you don't have to build yourself. And I think that's another big piece that came out of this conference is that I'll tell you one tool that Float Mobile Learning built and is generally free. It may be a charge. Usually they offer apps for free at their conferences. Often they do. But there's a tool that they have called, I think it's Wayflyer. But that application, you could use apps that other folks have built, right? So one of your approaches to mobile for your organization may be leveraging apps that are already existing. So you may choose to use Wayflyer to say, I want to offer a certain document based on a person's location. And that's all built for you. And you just basically upload the documents and set the location for that. But you could also use tools like Evernote in your organization. You can use tools like Wunderlist or, there's so many applications and there are so many uses that we have. And sometimes we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes we might just need to work with what's out there already and purchase that as a solution for our organization. So that's another big piece.
And they're all affordable. We're so locked into those mainstream ones, but there's a lot of free and inexpensive out there.
That's absolutely right. And but even if you're talking about the paid ones, $1 is, per user, even if you have, 100,000 users, $100,000 one time is a lot cheaper than building an app and sustaining it over a long period of time. A lot cheaper. Because every time there's an iOS update or an Android update, and you talk about, developing apps for multiple devices and the back end cost of that, there's just so much involved in that. And so, sometimes if there is an existing solution, sometimes that might be more logical for your organization. It just, it depends.
Yeah, it definitely does. I was thinking of the geolocation when she was demonstrating that, if for new employee orientation, to use that example again, you could put building maps. You could run a synchronous event, but that you could have building maps that were specific to the location where the learners are or something like that.
You absolutely could. Now that might be a little bit more difficult on like a 4-story building, so
you'd have to just show where their work areas or something.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's in different parts of the building, as far as we're thinking landscape instead of portrait, right?
Right,
if you're
right.
in different parts of the building, you could definitely pinpoint those locations specifically and give it a very targeted accuracy to say, I want it to be very close to this location and do that. And along those lines with geolocation, one of the things that came up in the Demo Fest this year was the use of NFC beacons, so near field communication beacons. And that's basically, it's being used in museums as an example to say, I have a beacon at this particular exhibit, and when I get close to that beacon, then my application can pop up some information about that specific exhibit. It might be a video or audio or a combination of that. So it's kind of the same thing as geolocation, but rather than using the device's GPS, it's based on that near field communication. And it's still using those device affordances. And I think that kind of gets down to the ideal that we're trying to really advocate in mobile learning, is that it's more about the device capabilities and the affordances that a device can give us, and leveraging that instead of trying to find ways to do the same old stuff just on a new device.
Did people talk about resistance, or were there case studies where they've overcome resistance to adding mobile?
Are you kidding me? Isn't that always the first thing that anybody ever says? Oh, we can't do that because of security in our organization, and we can't do that because we don't have money, or we can't do that because of whatever your reason. There were actually a few sessions this year on how to implement mobile in a high security organization. There were just some really phenomenal case studies where I think it was Booz Hamilton. There was someone.
Yeah, they're kind of a high security organization.
What's that?
They're kind of a high security organization.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is that I had one person in my session, in my pre-conference session, and he worked for the Federal Reserve Bank. And I know that that's high security because I've spoken for them here in Atlanta. And they actually, when you get there, they scan your car with like this wand, and they open everything up and basically sift through all your stuff before you can even park in the parking lot. So, there's a lot of security there. But one of the things that I think most people don't even realize or don't know is that mobile is more secure than desktop. And so, I think that part of that is just really understanding, well, to your point, the case studies are important to see how other people have approached that and gotten to implementation. But, some of the things that came out that are good research points, if you are in that type of situation where it's, the security issue, is looking into both mobile device management or mobile app management. And mobile device management just means that you have a person's device on lockdown. So you can remote wipe it, and you have control over an employee's actual device. And that's really more for corporately issued devices, because I'm not letting my organization have control over my device that I pay for. So if you have a BYOD policy, the bring your own device policy, where you have folks using their own devices to access content, then you would have maybe a mobile app management strategy, and or have a vendor that manages that for you, which means they manage security at the app level as opposed to at the device level. And that allows you to, if you have a banking application, you have to log into that banking application. That content about your balance and everything is not local on your device. It's being managed, the security is being managed at the app level. So at any point I can delete all that content out, or I have control over your information through the app and not through the device. And that's pretty much what everybody is moving to, because if you look at device management, it's just not going to be realistic long term. People want to use their own devices, but it's beyond that. Even if I'm issuing devices, it goes back to that adage of the BlackBerry. People just get tired of carrying around these devices on their hip. When they have two devices, they're juggling. It's just not really a good use of technology, outside of the fact that if you look at people like machine operators, where they may have tablets that they pick up at the beginning of their workday and they carry that with them. That's a good place where you could maybe keep that mobile device management in place.
We're going to that model with our new associates later this year.
Right. And those are the types of instances. If it's a device that you're keeping on site that someone picks up as part of their workday, then that is something that could be different.
It's for our frontline folks to do their orientation with a blended approach. And it'll be interesting to see, because the challenge why we've resisted that to this point is at our local community levels, our buildings, people have to manage inventory of devices, which is, they've got more to do than that. But it'll be interesting to see a year from now.
Yeah, it is. That's a really good point, and the resources that you do have to put into managing any kind of corporate issued device policy. But, bringing up orientation again, because I think that speaks to a lot of this audience, is, you have opportunities for walkthroughs of the building. You mentioned that earlier. You could do something like that on an iPod, or even an iPhone or whatever, but you could have some of those devices internally, and that's still mobile. It could just be MP3 walkthroughs or audio walkthroughs. We kind of think of the old museum when we were talking about that earlier, a museum tour or a tour of a national site, and you have the little headphones and you walk around and it plays the information for you. It's the same thing in orientation. How can you have some of those automated walkthroughs on something as simple as an iPod? And those are cheap, $40, and you've got an iPod Touch. And
6 years ago I wrote that proposal. We're not there yet.
Yeah, it's
using QR codes for free.
Right, and that's something that I think is when we talk about resistance, most of it is resistance because, one, people don't understand it, and two, they don't understand the impact that it has to the organization from a resource perspective. And it's beyond just this is how much it costs, it's how much does it take to manage it and sustainability. And that's something I think is important, and we'll probably see more of even at DevLearn or into the next year, is how do we effectively sell this to the business? How do we, bridge that gap to help people understand what the benefits are and articulate that in terms that make sense to the decision makers? Some of the things that we talked about in this conference was being able to sell mobile. How do you write a business case, and what are the types of things that your stakeholders are likely looking for? And there was some really good information around that too. The difficult part about doing a session like that or being able to consult someone is that everyone's situation is very specific for the most part, based on what your organization is and the organizational goals. But one of the things that I did in my session with Robert Gadd is we talked a lot about mobile strategy and the 5 things that you really need to have to build a mobile strategy. The first piece of it was making sure that you understand what your current infrastructure is. So what is it that you have currently as far as technology throughout the organization? Not just in the training function, but what does IT have access to? What does marketing have access to? All of those different pieces. How do we, or what types of things do we have access to already? The second piece of it was making sure that we understand our business goals of the organization and how does what we're doing tie into that. So,
always. A
lot of folks will say, well, we want a mobile strategy. Okay, well, tell me what your business strategy is. What are your business goals? Well, they don't even know sometimes what those are, So that's an important piece to a mobile strategy. And following up to that, you need to understand what your training strategy is. Inside of your training department, what is your training strategy? And how does that fit in or support your business goals? And if it doesn't, then you're in serious trouble.
Strategy and capability, both, whether it's your instructional design team, whether it's your ability to even support an initiative that's different, resilience, flexibility, all of that.
And then the thing is that so many times, we have our own things that we want to do in training. We have our own goals. And quite frankly, that's a reason why a lot of training functions are the first ones to go whenever a company is having a difficult time, because the training function has not been able to adequately explain how they contribute to the business goals. And so that's something that's really important. If you're talking about going into mobile, you have to be able to prove to them or articulate your value in general before you can say, I want to add another piece to the pie. Even if it is free, people are typically resistant to it in general just because they don't understand how training is currently supporting the bottom line. And that's not in every organization, but it is important when you're considering a mobile strategy. Understanding your audience is obviously important and what their needs are. That's kind of your 101 training basics, right, is understanding your audience. And then having a very clear communication strategy. How are you going to market and communicate this? If you've built this really cool thing, how are you going to market it? How are you going to let people know that it's available? What is your sustainment? How are you going to communicate to them over time to understand, how it's going to be, how updates are going to be made? How are you going to communicate those to people when they happen? Because when you're talking about mobile, once it's on the device, it's there. So when you have new content, unless you have something set up where you're pushing them new content and you're pulling off old content, then you could be in a situation where we are with documentation, where you have all these different versions out there and we can't get them back.
And with that, we are at the end of our time, believe it or not.
Sorry, Rick.
Sarah, we're going to have to get you back on. A lot to talk about.
Oh, yeah, there was so much in this conference. I don't think you could even cover it in an hour. But there was a lot of really great content. And I'm going to actually write a recap that'll be out there in the Twitterverse, I'm sure, here pretty soon.
That's great.
Oh, good.
Well, we will have the show up a little bit later on today. And for all you guys in the chat room, we haven't really gone to the chat room today, but
we had Leva, and she was in briefly and had to step away. But I am to say hello to Sarah and Rick for her.
Hello, Leva.
Yes.
And
hey, Leva, we miss you.
And if you're watching the recordings, please subscribe and let us know what you think. Give us your feedback. We will have contact information for Sarah on the show notes. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.